I've been working as a self-employed cleaner for over 8 years now, and not once did I imagine anything like this ever happening to me. At one point I was low on business, it just didn't seem to be happening for me. So along with your regular advertising like business cards, a website, advertisements on my car, I decided to advertise my services on Craigslist and similar platforms. After being informed that this is a good way to get myself new business, as you could advertise anything you want in these sites. I'd only been advertising for a week when a new customer approached me and messaged me. He was a male in his 40s who was disabled, wheelchair-bound, and lived alone. He included in his message that he was looking for a cleaner once a week to come clean his house. After a few messages back and forth and a phone chat, he sent me his address and I scheduled to clean his house for the first time Thursday of that week. I was excited that I'd only been advertising for a week and I'd already got a new client. On the day of, I made my way to the man's house following the GPS to his address. I noticed on the journey that the houses got fewer and further between. He seemed to live off-road on a country lane. It was a little out of the way, but when I reached it, I could see it was an old, as what I'd describe, estate house. I parked up and made my way to the door, ringing the doorbell. The man in a wheelchair answered. He looked very rough and tired in his face. He called me in. As soon as I entered, I could see it was quite dark in there. Most of the curtains were closed. He began to introduce himself and was very specific about what he wanted cleaned, explaining to me he wanted all the ground floor cleaned, front room, dining room, kitchen, etc. Then upstairs, the bathrooms, his bedroom, but not the back bedroom of the house. That would remain locked and didn't need cleaning. That really didn't bother me. I figured that the room was being used for storage or something like that. I agreed and began to work as Joe, my new customer, left me to it. Whilst cleaning his house over the following weeks, I noticed Joe was strange. A lot of the time, I would find him watching me clean. I'd turn around and he'd just be there, staring at me. On a few occasions, he got awfully close. At one point, he brushed past me and grazed my ass. He claimed it was a mistake and apologized, but I wasn't too sure it was. Felt like he did it on purpose. He would then go upstairs in his lift, and I wouldn't see him for a while. When I made my way upstairs, I noticed he was in the locked room he told me not to clean. As I neared, I could hear talking and loud giggling coming from inside of it. It was odd, because I knew he lived alone. I assumed he was on the phone talking to a friend or a relative or something. As the weeks went by, it went from him watching me to him beginning to ask me private questions about my personal life, like, do you have a boyfriend? Do you live alone? And strange questions like, does anyone know that you're working here? Had I told anyone about my new job? He would then again disappear upstairs. These questions bothered me and made me feel pretty uncomfortable. I thought to myself, no one would ask those kinds of questions. We hardly know each other. With all the questioning and the fact that I felt uncomfortable with him watching me on the job, I should have called it a quits and listened to my gut. But I needed the money, and he paid well. So, as you probably guessed, I decided to continue working there. But feeling uneasy with the whole situation, I did, however, tell my sister all about it. I felt sorry for the guy being wheelchair-bound, but couldn't help but find him strange and really creepy with how he acted. She didn't live far from me, and we were very close. If we weren't sisters, we would be best friends. I gave her the address of the house I was working in. The day before I was next scheduled to go and clean the place, I asked her to check on it for me and give me a call, and joked if she didn't hear from me, that's where I'd be. The next day, I was in Joe's kitchen cleaning, when to my annoyance I noticed Joe acting strange, watching me again intently like he was waiting for something. Did he not trust me or something? Was he expecting me to rob the place? I remember thinking all these questions. Joe then approached me closer and offered me a drink. He'd never done that before. He'd always just said, "Help yourself to a drink." I declined, saying thank you, but I'd already done myself a water. This seemed to agitate him as he just stared uncomfortably for a second before wandering off. Weirded out by how he just stared at me like he was angry, I continued to clean, just wanting to get the job done and leave. But it was then I heard Joe calling me from another room. He was in his front room. He called me over and asked if I could quickly clean something up as he just accidentally spilled something. He'd spilled a drink all over the floor, so I grabbed a cloth and knelt down to clean it. I looked back to ask him what he'd spilled, but again, he'd disappeared. I finished up and went back to the kitchen, having a drink of my water. I heard the lift. Joe was heading upstairs. Great, I thought, as I was just about to clean up there. I finished up and headed upstairs. As I reached the top of the stairs, for the first time, the room that was always locked was open, and the door was slightly ajar. I remember thinking it was strange, as it was never open. I couldn't see Joe anywhere. Curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see what was behind there, why it was always locked. I slowly approached the door. I was beginning to feel all hot. As I slowly pushed the door slightly to peek my head in, the door creaked. What I saw behind that door was a monitor screen set up with all the rooms of the house displayed on it. A sickening feeling swept through my body as I saw printouts of me cleaning around the house scattered all around. This creep had been spying on me all this time, but what scared me the most was in the room all the windows were boarded up, and in the corner there was a huge kennel-like cage. Still feeling hot, I began to suddenly feel lightheaded. My legs felt heavy, and all of a sudden it hit me. I felt fucking awful. Terrified, I turned to head back downstairs to leave. And that's when at the opposite end of the corridor, I saw Joe sitting in his wheelchair, staring straight at me. I tried to muster some words, but I felt so disoriented. Fear crashed through me as I heard Joe say, "Don't worry, you'll be okay soon." I looked at him as the sobering realization kicked in that the bastard had drugged my water. Then the worst thing imaginable to me happened. I saw Joe stand up out of his wheelchair. He wasn't even disabled. He broke out running towards me. This was it. I was dead. This was how I was going to die. All of these thoughts ran through my head before I passed out. I woke up, confused and disoriented, to the sound of people calling my name. I remember thinking, did I dream what happened? But then the terrifying reality hit me that I was still in that house, only to my disbelief there were police next to me. They told me my sister was outside and that she had reported something being wrong with me, having not heard from me at all, fearing something bad had happened. The police had come to check on my location given to them and found my car outside. Knowing I was still here, even though Joe had denied it, trying to claim that my car had broken down and I'd gotten a ride home with somebody to collect and tow my car the next day. They didn't buy it and searched the house, finding me locked in that room. I am so lucky and will always be in debt to my sister and her fast thinking. She knew something was wrong when she didn't hear from me, when she did exactly what I'd asked her to do, to check on me. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be telling this story right now. That man's real name wasn't even Joe. It was found that this guy had set up the profile to lure someone in to kidnap. I just happened to be that unlucky woman. So please, be careful when you meet people online. It's sad that in this world, things like this are not uncommon. I worked as a cleaner at a motel where I lived in New Mexico. It was nothing special. In all honesty, it was pretty poor and basic. But it was cheap and a place for people to get their heads down for a quick one-night stopover or something. But along with cheap prices came its seedy reputation that brought some crazy people along. Doing that job, you see a lot of things, and being a cleaner, you can imagine the states you have to clean up from drug use, leftover syringes, trash rooms, and what you can imagine being left over from hookers. I'm 40 now, and this happened to me 6 years ago, and I still struggle to get the images out of my head of what I saw. Most of my shifts consisted of overnights. It was easier for me that way. During the day, I could look after my kids until the oldest one was back to look after the younger daughters. It wasn't something I planned to do forever, but as a single mom, it got me by at the time. I just started my shift over a few days off and was headed into a long weekend stretch. You had cleaners in the day and cleaners on the night for sorting empty rooms and when guests leave or arrive late. I was doing my rounds on the lower ground floor outdoor rooms facing the car park. I cleaned up a few rooms by now when I passed one of the rooms down on my schedule to clean. It had a do not disturb sign on the door though. I found it strange, but it wasn't uncommon for the schedules to have a few mistakes on them. So I remembered the number and continued with my rounds and left it, thinking nothing more of it. I went on to finish the night pretty smoothly, with most of the rooms not being so bad to clean and the motel being pretty quiet. I left the next morning, swapping with my colleague but not mentioning to her that I hadn't cleaned that certain room. The next night when I arrived back in, like clockwork, I swapped with my colleague and took over for the night. It was nearing 11 p.m. I was cleaning a different section of the hotel this time. When skimming through the cleaning sheet, I saw that same room from the night before had still not been cleaned, seeing as it was marked down on the sheet. After I'd finished up with the section I was in, I decided I'd take a walk out there and check on it. As I did, I again saw the do not disturb sign on the door. This time, I decided to give the door a knock. There was no reply. I knocked one more time just in case whoever was in there didn't hear me. But again, no reply. We get told not to irritate the guests or disturb them if the signs are clearly displayed on the doors. So at that point, I didn't want to risk getting in trouble with the management as I needed this job. So I left and thought on my way out I'd ask the guy at check-in if the room was still occupied. If not, my colleague could clean it in the morning. It was then, while I was on break around 1:30 a.m., I got a call from the guy on the desk with a complaint about a room not being clean and smelling bad, as someone had checked in late passing through. What was strange was it was the room right next to the one I had checked with the do not disturb sign. I headed down to the rooms to attend the issue and see what was wrong with the room. As I met the guy who had complained, he told me that the room smelled rancid. Whilst he was moving to another room, I entered to clean it. As I did, I could clearly smell what he was on about. It was disgusting. I looked everywhere to locate the source of the smell, as the room itself was pretty tiny. It's then I realized where the smell was coming from. All the rooms at the hotel had adjoining doors inside, joining room to room, and the smell was clearly coming from the other side of the adjoining door. It was then that I realized something wasn't right, and a little bit of a panic started to kick in, not wanting to know what was on the other side of that door. I got the assistance of my colleague from the front desk before going into the room. He couldn't leave the desk unattended, so he said he'd get someone down to meet me. I didn't know who or what the hell was behind that door, and I was not going in alone. As I got the master key and opened the door, it was then, as it creaked open, the rancid smell broke through the darkness of the room and went straight up our noses and hit the back of our throats, like we could actually taste the disgusting thing. It was the worst thing I have ever smelled. Think of the worst thing you've smelled and multiply it by 100. This is the only way to describe it. I feared turning on the light, terrified to reveal what it was. But as I did and entered, the room was empty. No one or nothing was there. We entered further, and the heat and the nauseating smell just made us want to throw up. My eyes were watering. The smell was coming from the bathroom area. Adrenaline pumping through me as my colleague took the lead and we stood outside the bathroom door. As we slowly pushed the door, it creaked open as we searched for the light switch, bringing light to the room. I could see straight away, in the bathtub behind the draped shower curtain sat a figure. Static, not moving a muscle. Fixated on it, my colleague called out and no reply. His hand hovered the curtain as if reluctantly, wanting to pull back the curtain. But then as he did, the fear I had turned into reality as I let out a scream. Behind the shower curtain lay a dead, rotting body. A headless body. The head had been removed. As I backed away, feeling like I was going to throw up, what I saw next shocked me to the core. Behind us, as I turned, I saw in the sink parts of the head, the eyes, teeth he removed, tongue and nose scattered all over the blood-soaked sink. Someone had removed everything from the head, yet the head itself was still missing. I ran out of the room, shivering, my skin crawling from what I'd just seen. We called the police and they came immediately and roped off the scene. It was discovered between the crossings on shifts with the other staff that room had not been opened or cleaned for 5 days. The head was never found, and a suspect was never apprehended. Whatever sick monster did this is still out there. That, along with the images imprinted in my head, still give me nightmares to this day. And that's gonna do it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please let us know by liking the video. It really helps us out. And don't forget to subscribe to Horror Motives and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a thing. If you have any comments or suggestions for future videos, let us know down in the comments. Until then, the fear lies within.